The cooking the housemaid makes is so terrible.
Throw it all away and let's order pizza today.
My mother-in-law and brother-in-law, who don't help with any household chores, had moved into my house and kept saying whatever they wanted. I felt I had reached my limit with this lifestyle, so I decided to end their lives. I'm Penelope, turning 30 years old. Finally, my life has settled down, and peaceful days have returned. It all began when I attended a company drinking party. It was there that I met my ex-husband Sebastian. I first met Sebastian at a drinking party, and we immediately hit it off. We became close quickly, exchanged contact information, and started going out for drinks together regularly. Even though we worked in different departments at the company, he would wait until I finished work and would listen kindly when I complained about making mistakes. He was supportive and empathetic when I had personal concerns, and being with him became a comforting time for me. And it seemed Sebastian felt the same way. He asked me to become his girlfriend. I was really happy and we started dating. After that, we did typical things that couples do. Going on trips on weekends, having dates nearby places, and that kind of stuff. Then, around 2 years into our relationship, Sebastian proposed to me. I had a strong feeling that I wanted to marry him, so I happily accepted his proposal. Both my parents and Sebastian's parents gave their consents to our marriage, so we began preparing for the wedding while working. It was a bit challenging, but I felt fulfilled and happy throughout the preparations. Finally, we were able to have our wedding ceremony, and everyone congratulated us. After we got married, Sebastian moved into the apartment my father had bought for me. Even after marriage, Sebastian remained kind and shared household chores with me. When I was busy, he would take care of everything without complaint. I was truly happy to have married such a wonderful person. One day, Sebastian's father passed away from a long-term illness. With Sebastian's mother now alone in their family home, Sebastian approached me with a proposal.
Mom will be alone now, so let's have her live with us. It would be inconvenient for her to be on her own, and I'm the eldest son, so I should take care of her.
I hadn't been married for long, and I still wanted to enjoy my newlywed life. The idea of living with my mother-in-law made me a bit disappointed. However, I also understood that my mother-in-law must be feeling sad after losing her husband, and I wanted to fulfill my kind-hearted husband's wish. Above all, I thought that if I were in his shoes, I would definitely do the same. So, I decided to accept my husband's request. However, if I had known the tragic events that would happen afterward, perhaps I would haven't agreed to this cohabitation and could have continued to live happily. So we started living with my mother-in-law, but she never washed the dishes she used or left her clothes everywhere even though she was always at home. She settled in but didn't help with any household chores at all. Just as I was feeling frustrated with this situation, another tragedy happened suddenly. It was around the time when people began their long holiday. When we were relaxing at home, my husband's phone rang.
Huh. I wonder what's going on.
He started talking with someone on the phone. It seemed like it was from my brother-in-law, Adam. My brother-in-law had returned home for a long holiday, only to find that their family home was gone. Apparently, he was shocked, so he called my husband. And after the conversation ended, my husband told me,
Adam seems to have come back, but since our family home is gone, he'll be staying with us during the holidays.
However, I suddenly had a doubt. I remembered that my brother-in-law works in the hospitality industry and the long holiday period should be a busy season. It didn't seem likely that he could take time off during such a busy time. Isn't it a bit strange? Adam works in the hospitality industry, so how could he come home?
Maybe he just happened to get time off.
My husband wasn't really interested in talking about it. And about 2 hours later, my brother-in-law arrived at our house. Moreover, he came carrying lots of luggage in both hands and hurriedly entered the house. As soon as my brother-in-law arrived at the house, he immediately confronted my husband.
Sebastian, why is our family home gone?
After Dad's funeral, Mom would be alone, right? So she sold the family home and moved in with us. Didn't I tell you about it?
I didn't hear anything about that. Jeez.
My brother-in-law kept complaining to my husband and mother-in-law about the fact that their family home was gone. I have only met my brother-in-law twice, once when my husband and I went to visit his family before we got married, and the second time was at our wedding. My impression of my brother-in-law is that he tends to react with defiance when criticized by my mother-in-law or husband about small things. He comes across as immature, selfish, and somewhat self-centered, and honestly, I find him difficult to deal with. I wonder if this time too he will insist on having his way and continue living in our house like this. Just as I had feared, my bad feeling came true. My brother-in-law said to my husband,
You're living in a nice apartment. Do you have any unused rooms or something?
There's one room that we're not using. It's just being used as storage.
Well then, there's no problem if I move in.
He said like that. Of course, both my husband and I opposed the idea of living together with my brother-in-law.
Why not? You sold the family home without consulting me. Mon can live here, but why can't I?
However, he started throwing a tantrum. Then my husband asked my brother-in-law,
What about your job in the hospitality industry? And weren't you supposed to be living in as a trainee?
Brother-in-law replied,
Well, you see, I've got mentally tired from my current job. I've taken a temporary leave for a while.
If my husband heard this, he would definitely find it hard to refuse. He glanced at me, silently pleading for understanding. I shook my head, signaling that it was impossible because my mother-in-law was already living with us.
All right. Just for a little while, okay?
Seriously? You're the best.
However, my husband agreed to it. Even though my husband must have seen I shook my head in disagreement, he still accepted my brother-in-law. I immediately called my husband into the bedroom. Hey, what were you thinking about accepting Adam like that? You saw me shake my head and refuse, didn't you? In response, my husband, true to his kind nature, argued.
I couldn't just abandon Adam, could I?
However, once we accepted my brother-in-law into our home, it's obvious that it would be difficult to kick him out. I hoped that he would return to work soon. At first, we had a quiet life. But my husband became busier during the peak season and started working overtime on weekends. Then I discovered my brother-in-law's true nature. It was when my husband wasn't around. It seems like my brother-in-law thought I wouldn't say anything. He started giving me orders, like cook him something because he's hungry, or go buy him some cigarettes because he's busy. Moreover, he started smoking in the living room, so I had to repeatedly tell him to go to the balcony. Whenever I pointed it out, he would make a very displeased face.
You're just my brother's wife. Don't tell me what to do.
He made sarcastic remarks. My mother-in-law didn't say anything about it either. And she and my brother-in-law both bosses me around. When I cooked dinner, I was told things like,
The cooking the housemaid makes is so terrible.
Throw it all away and let's order pizza today.
my mother-in-law and brother-in-law, who didn't do any house chores, said whatever they wanted to say to me in my house. My brother-in-law who behaves and talks which make it hard to believe he's just a guest. And mother-in-law who lets him do as he pleases without ever reprimanding him. Even though a month had passed since then, my brother-in-law didn't show any sign of returning to work. I wanted to change the situation, so I decided to discuss it with my husband. I told him about his brother's behavior. I couldn't bear it anymore. But, when I had a talk with my husband, he said,
Well. It's only been a month. He's probably been through a lot. Let's give him some more time and space.
So I said, he's definitely lying about being mentally stressed and taking leave. It's been a month, and he hasn't made any effort to go back to work. And when you're not around, Adam and your mother are constantly bossing me around. I told my husband everything, but he didn't listen at all.
I don't get that vibe from either of them when I'm around, so I can't believe it. Are you just making up lies because you want to kick Mom and Adam out of our house?
In the end, he called me a liar. Why doesn't he believe me and still take their side? I was so furious. And that's when the incident happened. As I happened to wake up early one morning and headed towards the bathroom, I noticed a burnt smell coming from somewhere. I tried to locate its source and found it was coming from my brother-in-law's room where he was sleeping. I hurriedly opened the door, only to find my brother-in-law had been smoking in bed, and it seemed the cigarette had not been extinguished. There was a burnt spot on the mat where it had fallen. I rushed to get water and managed to extinguish the fire, and I woke him up and yelled at him as I couldn't hold my anger any longer. What were you thinking? I've told you many times not to smoke inside the house. Upon being awakened, my brother-in-law seemed somewhat surprised but quickly responded to me with annoyance.
The fire's already out, right? Don't bother waking me up over something done. You're just my brother's wife, so don't get bossy.
I couldn't stand him anymore. You know what? You're lying about being mentally stressed and on leave, aren't you? You keep going against everything I say and throwing tantrums like a child. Have some awareness that you're just a guest here. If my husband hadn't allowed it, there's no way I would have let you live here. I let it all out. Upon hearing the commotion, my mother-in-law and husband intervened.
Hey, Penelope. What's this all about? How dare you say such things to my son? He's going through a tough time at work right now. How can you yell at someone like that? Unbelievable.
That's right, Penelope. Apologize to my brother. What you said just now was way out of line.
My husband and mother-in-law ganged up on me, blaming me for everything. Meanwhile, my brother-in-law watched the scene with a smirk on his face. I couldn't understand why I was the one being blamed. I've accommodated my mother-in-law, who became a widow, and my brother-in-law who barged in after taking leave, just as my husband wanted. Yet, instead of reprimanding his brother, he joined my mother-in-law in blaming me. And my husband added,
I've heard from my brother that you're always scolding him when it's just the two of you. How dare you treat him like that just because you want him to leave? I've even considered divorce and have already signed the divorce papers. Cool off and think about it.
All right. If you're going to take your brother's side like that, then I'll divorce you or do whatever it takes. I'm leaving this house. I've reached my limit, and as I prepare to leave for work, I've decided I will never forgive them. That day, I was irritated all day, and I got calls from my husband several times, but I ignored them all. I finished work and then got home, determined to expose my brother-in-law's lie. I found the house key wouldn't work. No matter how many times I tried to unlock the door, the key wouldn't turn, so I called my husband. Then he said me.
I've changed the locks at home, so don't bother coming back. Reflect on your actions, and if you're truly sorry, I might let you back in. I'm considering divorce, so think carefully about your next steps.
Furious that it seemed like I was being blamed, I called my parents. My parents said I could stay with them until this situation settled down, so I told them all the details. Upon hearing this, my father became furious.
Unbelievable. I'll make sure they regret this.
He then made a phone call to someone. Shortly after, a lawyer whom my father had presumably called arrived at the house. Afterwards, my father and the lawyer discussed matters regarding the apartment he had bought for me. Since the apartment is in my father's name, he said he would sell it immediately. I wanted a divorce, so it was necessary for my husband to agree to this. However, he had already signed the divorce papers, so there didn't seem to be any issue with that. It would take a week for my father's apartment sale to be completed, so until then, I commuted to work from my parents' house. Finally, after a week had passed, I went to my husband's house with my father and the lawyer. When I rang the intercom, my husband answered.
Penelope, have you finally cooled off? Wait, Penelope's dad, and... who is that person?
As I explained, I had brought my father and the lawyer with me. My husband became flustered. We entered the living room and got straight to the point. I want you to leave this house right now.
What? Right now?
Sebastian stammered nervously, clearly intimidated by my father and the lawyer. Then my brother-in-law and mother-in-law intervened.
Here we go again. I said I'd leave once I get better.
That's right, Penelope. Adam is still emotionally unstable. Please cut him some slack. If you want Adam to leave that much, why don't you leave instead?
My brother-in-law and mother-in-law were both being selfish and unwilling to listen to me. Seeing no other option, I asked the lawyer to explain on my behalf.
All of you need to leave the house. The owner has decided to put this house up for sale.
The lawyer's explanation seemed to shock them.
Huh? What? What do you mean? This house belongs to Sebastian, right? Sebastian, you haven't sold it, have you?
Just because it belongs to my brother doesn't mean his wife has the right to sell it without permission.
Then my father spoke up.
This house was a gift from me to my daughter, given when she became a working adult. In fact, the contract is in her name. So, there should be no problem if she decides to sell this house.
He then presented the contract documents to my husband and his family. Upon seeing the documents, my husband, mother-in-law, and brother-in-law turned pale. Then I said to my husband, "Hand me the divorce papers that you said you've already signed. You wanted a divorce too, so there shouldn't be any issue, right?"
I just got in the heat of anger.
Just got in the heat of anger? Yet you signed the divorce papers beforehand. That makes no sense. Stop making excuses and just hand it over. Or should we both hire lawyers and settle this through negotiations? In that case, we might need to send certified documents to your company. My husband quickly brought the divorce papers. Then I signed the papers as well. Well then, this is it. leave by the end of this month. I think you understand, but if you don't leave, it'll become a police matter. With that, I got up to leave.
This is no joke.
My brother-in-law shouted angrily as he stood up and tried to grab me. If you lay a hand on us, I'll call the police immediately. For someone supposedly mentally unstable, you're quite aggressive, aren't you? Why don't you get back to work? However, as I said so, he started punching the floor in frustration. Damaging property is also a police matter, you know. I quickly added.
Damn it. All right.
My brother-in-law yelled in frustration, thrashing about. After that, thanks to the lawyer, the proceedings went smoothly. The divorce was finalized successfully, and I managed to evict my husband and in-laws from the house. I heard through the grapevine that my ex-husband couldn't support 3 adults on his salary alone, so he told my ex-brother-in-law to leave immediately. Then, unable to tolerate my ex-husband's words, my ex-brother-in-law reportedly punched him and got arrested by the police. Apparently, this incident shocked my ex-mother-in-law and caused her to develop depression. As for me, I used the money from selling the apartment to buy a new house with my parents, and now we're living happily as a family of 3.